Thank you, Peter. Kind of surprising. Peter says, hey, you're the old man up here. So 30 years of experience, God, it's almost impossible to believe that's true. What we're going to talk about today, as Peter mentioned, is purchase orders. And purchase orders really, the whole purchase order process. One of the things Peter also mentioned was that companies frequently trade forms back and forth, and no one ever signs anyone else's forms. There were some smart people a long time ago that thought about this and had the battle of the forms concept. We're going to talk about that, tell you what it is and why it happens. Look at what law governs, and then some perspectives from both the buyer's view and the seller's view, and have a little set of avoiding the gotchas. That's my presentation. And Scott is going to talk a little bit about real life type of situations where we have the creation or amendment of your purchase orders with the use of emails. So pay attention to that one. It's going to be real important. And last, we're going to have Ron, who's going to tie some of this all together for us with some real life adventures. So how does this really work? There's this concept of paper passing back and forth, and paper has gone from being real paper. Some people still use that. Other people just do everything by E. Both of them work. E does work. Faxes work. Does anybody still use a fax? Faxes work. And it starts out, one side sends the form, the other side sends a form back, and then I send you another, and really nobody is doing anything until finally somebody says, okay, here's the product. You ship it. Maybe it's used, maybe it's rejected. It's a whole set of laws that comes together that you wouldn't normally think about. And one of the problems with not thinking this through is this set of laws is different than the common law. We'll get there. This happens, the short answer is because it does, because it always has. And when we talk about these smart people, I always like to talk to them as smart people. I view them as the little guys with the bow ties back in 1959 who started working on this collection of laws to put them together into the Uniform Commercial Code. And that has infected the whole country. Okay, except Louisiana. It's infected the whole country, so we are using it, and you can count on it almost identically from state to state. When the bow tie boys put it together, they did it. There were some things everybody couldn't agree on, so they had alternative A and alternative B. And when the states adopted it in this particular code section and that particular code section, not for the whole thing, they had these opportunities to select A or B. But those are just the nuanced changes around the country. The rest of it, you can pretty well tell from Ohio to Indiana to California, well, maybe not California, up to Alaska, almost all the same. Why does it work like this? Because it works, and nobody really wants to change it. So how does this flow of paper go back and forth? How does it actually happen? It might start out with a request for a quotation, and then you have the seller sending over a credit application to the buyer before they're going to sell to them, and then documents going back and forth, a request for proposal, all sorts of documents which each individual company is going to use until you get down to the end where a purchase order is finally shipped or is delivered. And then the product is shipped, and it's got an invoice that comes with it. It's got a shipping ticket. And you know what? All these things have different terms connected to them. And when you have all these different terms, which one is right? Which one is the one that we're going to use to determine what our contract actually was? And what's even worse about this is people are so bad at doing this that it's not that my terms are different than your terms. My terms are different than my terms. Because when I put the documents together, I wrote this one, I wrote the purchase order this day, and I wrote the quotation a year later, and I didn't look at both of them. And I said, or maybe my lawyer said, this is a good term. I just had a case like this, so we should put this in there. That's why contracts get to be this thick. Peter mentioned that I do construction law. And from a subcontractor's perspective, So I'm looking at these documents that come out, and they used to be, I talk to people all the time and say, I used to do work on a handshake, and now what do you have? You have a book that's your contract because smart guy lawyers said, oh, we have to protect you against this and have to protect you against that. Sooner or later, you've got this raft of documents that are going to help or hurt you. But what really hurts is when, particularly in the purchase order segment, they're not combined. So if you're in that process, be sure your documents at least all agree with each other. So what really are the contract terms? Your concept, your objective from the offensive standpoint, from the I want to have the best contract for me is to what? Get your terms and conditions into the contract. And the other guy? Well, he's trying to do exactly the opposite. He's trying to get his terms in and avoid your terms. We talk about this UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code again, and particularly the segment we're talking about is sales, which is in chapter 1302. Now we're going to go through all that and it's in your materials. It's the sales section. If you ever want to have this urge to go read the UCC for yourself, if you're tired at night but just not falling asleep, please go there. It'll do wonders for you. Hop on the computer, go to Google, wonderful little search engine, type in 1311, I'm not sorry, that's my other one, 1302.01. First thing it'll pop up is Law Writer. It'll take you to the raw code, and you can look right through it. It's really easy. I've also given you, or if you just want to type in, it's codes.ohio.gov, but you don't need that. If you want to get a little more in-depth research, which is probably pretty good, you can go to Wikipedia. I find Wikipedia to be a wonderful resource. Don't always count on it because people can manipulate it, but it really is pretty good for a broad overview. So we're talking about sales, and what it really is narrowed down to is the sale of goods. Goods are a variety of things. Almost everything you're thinking of is a good. The table you're sitting at, the chair you're sitting on is a good. My remote control is goods. The carpeting is goods. The ceiling tile. Everything that you can touch that's not real estate, for the most part, is goods. So materials and equipment. In the construction industry, I deal with it from the raw materials of carpeting, but concrete and steel and all of those things. Construction is really no different than any of your businesses because it's just a business that happens to do this particular type of stuff. If you are working with some of these contractor type people, kind of beware because there's a number of contractors who do one thing. They've got this dramatic contract that they put together for their subcontractors. And then they thought, I'm going to save time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my word processor and take out the word subcontractor and put in the word supplier. Don't use those documents because there's just a whole raft of different obligations that you have as a subcontractor than you do as a supplier. Refuse to use those. You'll get yourself in way too much trouble. One of the concepts, though, when we're thinking about construction, or any of the other things where you're putting stuff together, is when is it goods and when is it services? Because the example is the supply of ready-mix concrete. You've seen the concrete trucks go down the road with the barrel turning, and they pull into the lot where they're going to drop the concrete off, back it up, and reverse the rotation on the drum, and the concrete comes out. Is that a good or a service? There's a man actually working to put the concrete, deliver it to exactly this spot or exactly that spot, to add water when he's told, to do all kinds of varieties of things, as well as just purely deliver it. Those are incidental to the sale of that good. That is a good. That is covered. When they talk to us about it in law school, like the first week in law school, the example is if you're a woman having your hair colored and something goes wrong with the color, what is it? Was that the sale of a good, the hair color, or was that the provision of a service, putting the hair color on your hair? So you have to look at which is the more important aspect. By the way, that's the service aspect. It is not the color. It is the provision of the service to apply the color. So you're looking at what is the predominant feature. In the standard, remember I said it was different. In the standard non-UCC type of area, so where it's not just this goods, the concept is contracts have to be a mirror image. Contracts, if I have one contract and you have the next contract form and they're going back and forth, you have to decide, you have to make sure that they're the same. And that can apply any number of ways. Generally, they're not ever exactly the same. And people sometimes usually sign other people's documents, but not always. Sometimes they just go to work. So I send you a contract and say sign it and send it back and go to work, and you just go to work. In the meantime, you have sent a different contract form to me. Or, even more likely in construction, I have sent you a proposal with my terms and you have replied with a contract. And I go to work. Was it my proposal or your contract? It's the last one in the non-UCC area because I accepted your proposal by going to work. That's the way the contract is formed there if both parties didn't sign the same contract. What happens though, that's the common law, that's the last shot rule. That's not so much battle of the forms though. The last document in that sequence is the one that has the most control. The counteroffer always trumps the offer. So when you go to buy a car, you see the $35,000 car and you say, I'll give you $29,000 for that. And they say, nothing doing, we'll sell it to you for $34,000. Well, do you get it for $34,000 or $29,000? It was the last offer. So when you're in the UCC setting, this is completely reversed. The stronger document, because there is no mirror image rule here. Why isn't there? Because the statute takes it away. The rule here is not so much that you have the opportunity to use the last document or to be stuck with only one document, but you may end up with potentially a collage of documents. However, what really happens is the UCC tries to order them, to give you the strongest, when there's a conflict in terms, to give you the strongest, the distinct advantage to the first document out there. And Ron will talk a little bit about that. He's got a case right on point. If you can be the first one to talk, the first one to deliver a document, you're on top. So if you can do that, please do. It'll help you out. You can fix that along the way. If you're not the first one to deliver a document, there's ways that you can work around to make sure that your terms are in there, particularly when they're opposed to the other terms. The documents can be by way of a quote or a proposal. The response from the buyer can be a purchase order or any number of things. It doesn't have to say purchase order on the top to be a purchase order. It's a purchasing document. The UCC applies, it doesn't apply in absolutely every circumstance. First you have to ring the bell and make it a deal that's over $500. Once that's in play, now the UCC, the rule of sales is going to apply. And in this over $500 area, the statute requires that there be a writing sufficient to indicate the contract has been made. Boy, who wrote that? I know, some guy with a bow tie. Signed by the party against whom it is going to be enforced. Same bow tie guy wrote that. And then, if you have the document that's not signed, you can't just turn around and say, he never signed my document. I don't have a contract with him. I can walk away from this. No, that can be overcome by performance. So the same concept that I mentioned in the non-UCC area, where somebody ultimately goes to work, here, Here, it's when somebody ships. Now, that will be the performance. that can still be beaten if it's rejected or any number of things, and I think Ron will touch on that also. You can object if you have this delivery of materials, but you've got a very short period of time. You can't just sit on it forever and say, okay, I don't want it anymore, and send it back. Terms can be supplemented too. Among other ways, they can be supplemented by course of dealing or trade custom. One of the trade custom ones that we learned about in law school is chicken fat. How exciting can you be? The chicken fat case that we had was somebody is buying chicken parts, and the contract says this shall be no more than 47% chicken fat. Okay, we all understand 47% pretty easily. Well, it came through, and actually there was, who measures chicken fat? Maybe it's the pinch test, I don't know. Anyway, they looked at it, and it was well above 47. It was actually 50% chicken fat. And so that was determined by the buyer that that was a breach of contract because it was greater than 47%. Aha. But there's a trade custom that says, yeah, but what we really mean in circumstances like this is plus or minus 3%. So plus or minus 3%, 50%, you still had a contract that wasn't breached by it. So judges have a way of modifying what the statute actually says by saying close enough. Doesn't always happen. Be sure that there's a history to it if you're going to make that argument. The contract really has to be in a manner that is sufficient enough to show that you have an agreement. Now, not all the terms are going to be in there all the time. You know, there's some things that, the essential terms have to be there. How much are you going to deliver to me? How much am I going to pay to you? But sometimes there are things that are just left out. Like, what are the warranties? Well, I don't know. What are the warranties? There's a whole variety that you might expect, but then there are a few that are implied warranties that have to be specifically disclaimed. There's the warranty of merchantability. Some call it merchantability. But I'm right, of course. There is the warranty of fitness for a particular purpose. Well, fitness for particular, what the heck is fitness for a particular purpose? It is essentially, you said to me, I want a product that'll do this. And I say, we have this X15 right here that'll just fit the bill for you. And you say, great. I have just made a warranty to you that this X15 is fit for your particular purpose. Whether I meant to say so or not, I did. My alternative, if I don't want to be tagged with that responsibility, is in my documents, I can have, in all caps, bold letters, waiver of warranty of fitness for particular purpose. And now I've overcome this concept that that I made that warranty. But that's one of the gap fillers that the bow tie guys thought that was going to be important. People leave out warranties all the time. So let's put them back in for them, and if they want to get rid of them, they have to affirmatively remove them. Acceptance of the agreement can be made by a number of ways, by the promise to ship or the actual shipment. Whether, and this is interesting, even if it's non-conforming goods. So I tell you I'm going to ship something, I ship something, you wanted the X15, I sent the X14. I accepted the final deal that we were making by shipping even the non-conforming good. There's going to be a problem with that, but nonetheless, I have by my actions of shipping something created or finalized the contract. Sometimes there's additional terms, sometimes there's different terms. Again, we go back to the first document. So the first one says, you're going to have these warranties because I'm the buyer and I want these warranties. As the seller, I don't want to give you all those warranties. What about consequential damages? That's another one that's a big deal. So I sell you an 89-cent widget, and you install that 89-cent widget in the bottom of your building well, the building is going to fail because of that 89-cent widget. Do you have to tear the whole thing down and replace it? If you do, who's responsible for all that work? Well, it depends. What does your contract say? Was I, as the seller, responsible for consequential damages? Or did I disclaim them and leave you only with the right to collect, to have a new one shipped to you or your purchase price refunded? That's a real common one you see all the time. So if you want to have the ability to have the seller sell you the right thing and be responsible for your resulting problems, you better be sure that they haven't disclaimed consequential damages, because bow tie guys wove that into the statute for you. You can, yes, it's right here too. If you want to change those terms along the way, you can make your contract add some magic words, expressly made conditional on assent to my terms. Ron's going to cover that much better than this. Where we have this acceptance, they become a part of the contract unless the offer expressly limits acceptance to the terms of the offer. They materially alter. One of the ones that you might not think is a material alteration is the inclusion or removal of an arbitration clause. Bow tie guys thought arbitration clause was a really big deal. So now we have the opportunity. I put in an arbitration clause, that's the change. So now we no longer have this, I can fill in the gaps with the rules, I have to figure out the arbitration issue. If it's not, by the way, we're talking about all these things going back and forth. If somebody ever signs a document, that's the deal. I mean, if both parties sign the document, that's going to be the deal. We're talking about the situation here where the way it really happens, I send you a request for proposal, my terms. You send back your proposal. I send an acceptance. You send your next document, your acknowledgement, and they are all different. If somebody signs one, that's the deal. If nobody signs one, remember, we revert up to preference to the first document unless you've included those magic words along the way to change it. Let's go past that. So if there's no, if the offer is conditioned, this acceptance, the non-conditional acceptance, would form the contract. And now we're going to try and include the offerer's terms and conditions. Let's look at the warranties I was talking about. I'm not going to go through each one, but if you want just a quick thumbnail to get to the types of warranties we're talking about, here's the code section. Again, type it right into Google, it'll pop right up and you can have a look. Here's the consequential damages. This talks exactly about, so you want to see it? 1302.89 takes you right to how the consequential damages work and how that is going to affect either the buyer or the seller. Now, strategic terms, the advantages that you may want to try and get. Choice of law, venue, forum, where are you going to have this case heard? Is it going to be in arbitration? Is it going to be in litigation? Is it going to be in Cleveland, Ohio, or Oshkosh, Wisconsin? Does the prevailing party get their attorney's fees paid? What are the warranties? Are you going to be in arbitration or are you going to be in litigation? And if you're dealing particularly with construction, now the Ohio legislature has imposed something that's called the Fairness in Contracting Act, which is at 1431.62. It's got a whole bunch of fun things that we've added in there that talk about choice of law, venue selection, and dispute resolution, among others. But so there's special construction-only rules. Operational terms that are important, of course, one of the most important ones, payment, performance. When is it going to get there? What are the delivery terms going to be? When does the risk of loss take place? If I am shipping from my loading dock, do I have the risk of loss ending when it leaves my dock, or does it end when it arrives at your location? I don't know. What do the documents say? Some of the legalese that people are going to look for to have in there are warranty disclaimers, consequential incidental damages, indemnification. Indemnification is a big one, and I always have a problem with this indemnification concept because for the most part, it attempts to push down responsibility for somebody else's actions onto somebody else. If it's construction, don't you like me going back to construction all the time? You know, to the carpenter, the solution is always a hammer and a nail. Anyway, in construction, there's actually a specific spot, a specific statute that says you can't indemnify somebody else for their negligent or intentional acts or omissions. Doesn't apply across the board. What about conditional payment terms? I will pay you if I get paid. That could be a very important thing if you're the seller. So who wants the particular terms? Where there's a gap, look for the gap fillers. They can include all kinds of things that you absolutely didn't intend to put in, and they can just be vitally important to you. Those gap fillers are the surprise gotchas that are just waiting for you to get stuck in the ear with them. One of the things I wanted to mention before I leave is that I do have a live program every other Wednesday, for the most part. You can tell that my math isn't exactly right here. I did one yesterday. It's a live webinar, so you log on from your computer or listen on your telephone. I always do them for free. And a variety of topics. You see my next one is getting paid on time using notices of furnishing. That's in the construction industry. These are about a 90-minute program, and if you're interested in coming to them, you've got my email here. Send me an email. I will get you on the list, and you'll get an invitation every week. All you do is click on, and you can watch it again. Oh, and you can ask questions. You can ask questions here, too. They're always ready for you anytime you want. It's there to listen. I don't have it every other week here because on the 5th of March, I'll be out of town, so I just bumped it up 1 week. But really, they are every other week, and I actually have some of my partners who will be joining me to do guest lectures in the coming months. So we're going to run the gamut of things that will be of interest to you. That's my program. Next up at bat is my partner, Scott Lewis.